Hello. Welcome to People Purpose Place. And we're a couple of minutes late starting. So our third amigo who's missing will be giggling all the way because of the fact that we've had a technical foobar before we even get started. So welcome to People Purpose Place. We're working on solving the homing crisis one group at a time. And while we're solving the homing crisis, we're also dealing with the normal technical issues. And I think Christine has just dropped out. So I'll just wait for Christine to come back before we'll get started, because the two of us, a conversation of one is probably not going to be that interesting, I suggest. Today's episode is specifically around a bit of a concept that we've been working on, and Christine and I had a chat about yesterday, which is understanding that when we come together as a group, we also must first honor the individual and allow the individual to unfold into themselves so they can form best as a communitas. So today's conversation is going to be specifically around what tools and what practice you can go about, or anyone can go about, to hopefully start or continue on your journey to be the best version of yourself you can be. This is important because we've found with People Purpose Place in general that a common simple thing to understand about the journey of coming together as a group is if you aren't on that journey as an individual, then it's hard down the track to actually form a group. So I have learnt a vast amount from Rowan and Christine through this process about what we might need to do as individuals to continue to be present in the moment, to be able to work through the issues that happen when people come together as groups. And by issues, that also means the upside. So when things go really great as a group, being able to celebrate those, but also as things become challenging, to also be able to work through those things. So today's session will really be about, when Christine comes back online and we can actually have a conversation, will really be about us looking at modeling some of the humanizing tools that we can use as individuals to be able to hopefully form better groups. I would also like to acknowledge that obviously Rowan Blizzard isn't here today. He's actually away this week. Hope he's enjoying himself. It was his birthday in the last couple of days. And we can already see from the technical glitches that his presence is sorely missed. And not only from a technical point of view, but certainly having him be involved in the conversation is always really, really important. So I was just saying there couldn't have been any more glitches than we first started off with, Christine, really? And a conversation of one doesn't go very far. No. So it's good to get that out of the way. I just sort of filled in the background a little bit of the background to today's conversation with the idea of trying to find ways or tools that we might be able to model and go through today, have a bit of a conversation about how can we, even if it's a little tiny bit, find a way to work on ourselves so that we might form, and I use the word communitas, and I'd love to come back and have a chat to you about that, but find ways that we can form better community. So that was really what today's chat's about.
Great.
So you had actually come up with the check-in question, which might be quite poignant considering the start we've had, but which is what are you going to do during this podcast to be present?
You want me to start?
Yes, that'd be great.
Well, I'm approaching this from a few different angles. I've got this device that is set on, what did I set it on? Something like focused and clear. It's
Yes.
supposed to help you. vibrations, of course. And I've also had, especially whilst you were dealing with all the technical things, I just did a few breathing exercises just to center myself and got my feet on the ground. So that's me. How about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose after the few of the glitches, which happen to have happened all the time, right? So we're in
Yeah.
the internet world, but I must admit, and without Rowan's third amigo leg in there, I
Yeah.
must admit the anxiety increased a little bit during that process of running around trying to find all the moving bits. So, but I think being conscious that that has passed for me is important. And one of the things that has helped me be most present in these podcasts is being engaged in the conversation. So being able to feel like you're in that moment, listening and taking in and learning and observing and all of those things. So
Nice.
hopefully that gives us a good step to move forward. So cool. So I thought that, and we might just, I wrote down a couple of intent and desired outcomes before we actually start off into the yak. But one of the intents was to look at modeling some of the skills to help our personal journey with the desired outcome of hopefully getting some better understanding of ourselves during the process. And I think just to set the scene, you and I sort of had a bit of a chat yesterday and sort of said, without Rowan here, we better not balls this up, which we've successfully
No.
done. So maybe we think
We
about
don't want to appear too dependent, do we?
yeah, that's
That
right.
would be vulnerable, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And that's a very good lead into it. So we started having a simple conversation in the first part, and then we realized that started off with me asking you, how had your weekend gone today? And in the first instance, you decided not to answer me because you'd considered your response.
Yeah.
And maybe that's as good as any spot to start with, then us diving into, well, if we're going to know more about ourselves to be better in a group, sometimes it actually starts by stopping.
Yeah. Good point.
So
So
from
shall I
that,
pick? Go ahead.
so from that point of view,
Mhm.
why did you decide in the first instance yesterday when I asked you how you were going, not to answer with the standard response of "I'm
I'm
feeling shit"?
fine.
Yeah, or "I'm
Or
fine."
I'm not feeling well. One or the
Yeah,
other.
yeah,
Yeah, look, it's a funny thing, isn't it? I've been struggling with one of those chronic diseases, which is so difficult to get to the bottom of. We're finally
yep,
getting to the bottom of some of the parts of it, so I'm feeling better.
yep,
But I got so tired of people asking me how I felt, and it was such a struggle for me to decide whether I'd say I'm fine, which was lying because I felt like shit. And this is one of those conditions where you look fine. You don't look like
yeah,
you're dying. You don't look like a cancer patient or like you're suffering or anything. But man, inside it all feels pretty awful. So I've really struggled with that for a few years now, and I thought, well, I don't want to complain. I'm feeling better every day, but I did overdo it when you asked me the question yesterday. I had
mm,
overdone it the day before, so I was a little bit less bright than I was on Saturday. And I just didn't want to give a negative answer. So I couldn't answer.
yeah,
It was a funny thing. But what that led us into was a conversation about why do we insist on these sort of formulaic conversations. How are you going? Pretty good,
yeah.
thanks.
Good, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah. And the only other answer to that is sort of, oh, pretty ordinary. And then you just skip it, you just keep on going.
yeah,
Nobody asks any further. It's I now that I've actually been sick in my life, which it had never
Mm-hmm.
happened to me before, except for the
Mm-hmm.
occasional flu,
Yep.
I'm really finding I'm having a difficult time with that. And isn't it interesting that you have to go to a new transition in life to actually have the awareness that that question and that answer have become impossible or inappropriate, or I got to work out a new way to converse.
Yeah, yeah. And that we have become so autopiloted that we don't
That's it.
spend enough time stepping away and actually an actual fact checking in enough to go, hang on, maybe maybe I am feeling crap, but I don't need to dramatize it, and then
Yeah.
vice versa. I don't want to, also say everything's roses when it just isn't.
When it ain't.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and not all of that is about getting the other person's engagement. Sometimes it's just about being able to be honest about how you feel, whatever that moment might be. So that was really great, and I think we stepped on from that after we had actually really understood what that actually meant.
You know
Um,
what should have been a 30-second interchange. How are you going? I'm fine. You? Great. And then you get it. And we spent 30 minutes talking about it,
yeah, yeah,
which was,
and
I mean, to bring up the awareness of what those things actually mean.
yeah,
Sometimes it takes talking for 30 minutes around, well, it probably wasn't 30 minutes, but it was more than
yes,
3 minutes
yeah,
around a
yeah,
subject where you normally have just this set piece conversation. I think if we're going to pull five non-related people together
mm-hmm.
and try to find a way for them to live together successfully, I think we have to start really sort of looking into everything we do and becoming more aware of our conversation and behavior and patterns.
Absolutely. And I think some of that is um, some of that maybe can't be done all the time either. Like maybe there needs to
No,
be a space and a place where you do come together as a group to get into that level of depth, because obviously if you spend your whole day diving into every single comment you provided to each other, while we might have fun, it
yeah.
probably it
Well,
probably might not.
it isn't always appropriate, but
No, no.
I think pulling things apart when it's appropriate, down to the last detail, that's pretty important, because there's often a lot of resentment or a lot of something sitting behind the how you going, and you have to say, I'm fine, thanks.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. And it's funny how we've gone around and around in circles a few times with this. When we tried to say, how do we find the right people to go on this people purpose place journey?
Yeah.
We've struggled with the words of saying, maybe the people need to have done some self development. That's probably not it. Maybe they need to have read a few books so they're open to new ideas. But to some extent, the more we do this, we come back to the idea that they have to be willing to look at themselves in enough transparency that they can then communicate more freely and accept others, because they've had the ability to look at themselves a little bit and go, I am a bit crazy in some of those things, or I've got my own
Aren't we all?
glitches. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that maybe humanizes us enough that then when other people do stuff, that we can sort of see that with a different lens and not necessarily dive in because it's triggered us or whatever might be the case.
Yeah.
Um, and the second thing we started to move on to was after that, we actually moved on to the idea of, you know, mindfulness or meditation. And I must admit, and this would be good to have some more context around. I hadn't successfully had a lot of. I'd done what you would call, what everyone else would call meditation, on and off over the last probably 5 to 10 years, but sporadically probably. And I've only found, and as a part of what we're doing is trying to model practice that hopefully might help an individual to be better part of a group, or a group to be more cohesive. So I have committed to trying to find a way to get into meditation or mindfulness in a more regular practice. And I found Sam Harris's work, his app's called Waking Up. I found it to be quite well aligned to the way I think, and I understand. I've heard a few people say that, you know, traditional meditation might be quite Eastern in its thinking, and sometimes Western people just take a long time to get their hang of it. And I've only just found that process to be starting to work for me. Do you have a bit of a history with, you know, what's your background to do with meditation or mindfulness, depending on, well, hang on, have we got another hour?
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to say.
Right.
Well, look, I'm going to turn 74 this year. And
Yep.
when I learned meditation first was when I was 17.
Wow.
So that's a long time.
Yeah.
I've been, you know, that was transcendental meditation, the way all of us California hippies learned transcendental meditation back in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was the thing, you know, the Beatles were off of the Maharishi, and everybody had to learn TM, sorry. And so I've had basically a long lifetime of trying to become a good meditator. And you know what? I'm really shit at it still.
Yeah.
So interestingly, what I found recently, so here I'm wearing, you know, one of these technical things. I've got this one tracks my sleep and my this and my that. So I've got a bit of technology on. Got another couple of pieces right here on my desk. It's only when I got a headband that registers my brain waves in real time on an app that I really, really, really got into meditation. And I think it took the first 2 years of regularly using this, because I've been diagnosed with ADHD, and I don't like sitting still. Even when I'm sick, I don't like sitting still. Yeah. So I'm twitchy. I'm just a twitchy person, you know? So it took a couple of years just to learn to sit still for 45 minutes, for 60 minutes. And now I can actually sit still. Now, that's the, you know, you'd think I've been to these 7-day retreats and Vipassanas and all kinds of places where you have to go and meditate, but there's always the group pressure. Yeah. And often with those things, there's the option. You can either get up and do a walking meditation, or you can do a sitting meditation, or you can do a whatever. And of course, I had a very physically stressful and psychologically stressful career. And so when I went on one of those retreats, the first 2 or 3 days were just bliss. I don't have to talk. You know, I love to talk, but I don't have to talk. Yay. I don't have to move. I can just rest. And after that, I think it was only the group pressure that made me stick there and do it. And of course, the pressure on myself to be a good girl and to be perfect at meditation and to be capable and to be, you know, I've done a lot of this. I'm able to do this, to show myself not to be a complete failure. Well, I still felt myself to be a complete failure because I knew my brain was running around 1,000,000 miles an hour most of the time. And most of the time when I'm meditating today, same. I mean, I can watch myself a lot better than I used to. But, oh man, am I the great example of somebody who should write a book called I Hate to Meditate?
And that was really interesting because, you know, I had said that on Saturday I had a situation where I happened to be out in the bush, and I decided to do some mindfulness. And I might even come back to having a bit of a chat about that, about how the modern world sees those terms and why it scares some people and attracts other people. But I mentioned that I'm trying to find a way to have a better relationship with alcohol and not use it for any other thing other than a celebration. So, or a joyous event. So my wife and I finally had some time together out in the bush. So we decided to have a nice dinner, had a couple of scotches, and then I woke up the next morning And I went to do some breath work, which is another practice I'm trying to learn, again, quite badly. But I noticed on my devices, like we were talking about, that, hang on, my breath work dropped by 50%. It's almost like I was poisoning myself by a substance.
Which that's literally what you had done.
Because I was. But the flip side of that is being in an environment where I was more immersed in nature, I had less distraction than if I was normally where I am now, which after our conversation yesterday, surprisingly enough, I went into the backyard this morning to do my mindfulness, and not as good as it was in the raw bush out in the middle of nowhere, but certainly better than it had been sitting in front of a device here in front of my computer. But my point was, by being in the bush, that I was less distracted and only had one thought that was in 10 or 15 minutes of meditation. And I sort of thought, well, is this what all the practice does? Like, does it get you to this place, Kristen? And then you shot me down in flames.
Well, look, it's only my experience. I mean, I have friends who meditate and say that they get to blissful states, that they become, I mean, I've had that unified with the universe sort of a, almost transcendental feeling meditating, but bliss, never. So I know that people go there. I just haven't yet. Maybe will, but I'll keep practicing because I think it's good for me. And I think it's good to be able to call on that stillness, even physical stillness, physiological stillness, for a difficult conversation. And I must say that I've been in a situation where I've had to have a few difficult conversations recently. And I believe that the meditation, the ability to sink into myself and be still, is helping me with difficult conversations, which I hate as much as I hate to meditate.
And I think we discussed yesterday, and I've actually put that in as an episode for us specifically to dive into deeper. Because I think you're 100% right. Like, we're talking about non-related people. Even if you have a somewhat level of alignment, there are going to be points where you're going to have difficult conversations. And what can be the tools that we can learn ourselves to help other people hopefully adopt, to say, look, you're going to go into a difficult spot now. Maybe before you start, you can both just sit there in some level of awareness. And I think I didn't understand until Sam Harris I was looking for a place when I was meditating previously that I didn't understand was right there. Like, I was searching for something. I was searching for what you said, transcendental, and I was looking into the wilderness going, I can't fucking find this thing. But then he actually said, no, you actually, consciousness is underneath all the shit you're just putting there, right?
That's right.
So if you can actually find a way to fall through all of that stuff back into just pure consciousness, and I think that's why out in the bush it worked for me, is because you understand the birds aren't fucking thinking about anything. The kookaburras are just going, hey, bud, and they're yelling out across whatever. And when you have that, with that understanding, you go, they're just being conscious. Like, here we are putting in this layer of thinking over the top where they're just right here, right now. And maybe that being present then means when you're going to have that conversation with someone else that might be difficult, just enables you to have, what would be the word? Would it be empathy or presence, or what would help you to be more aligned with another person by being present?
Man, that's a very good question. It's a deep question. Until you said help you be aligned with someone else, the word that popped into my head was alignment. But I'm just not sure. I think that theoretically, if you think about the dorsal vagal or polyvagal theory, you don't want to be in dorsal vagal, you want to be in ventral vagal. And how do you manage to find your way to ventral vagal to be available to somebody else? Well, that's, to me, that's a real difficult trick, because it's not something I learned as a child. And it's not something that I've actually achieved in meditation, except for very minute glimpses. So, yeah, I don't think I'm much help, except to say,
no, you are.
I don't know how to do that. You know.
But I think you're right. And I think you provided us with the technical thing we're trying to get to, which is a start, right? And I don't know whether I was actually going to ever find an answer to that question, but you certainly filled in a part of it, which is it's not until we can feel safe and out of survival mode and into I'm now engaged with you as a human that you can actually even start that conversation.
I think that's right.
And maybe prior to that, if you're coming into a difficult conversation, all of those survival mechanisms are up. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe the technical response is both people are finding a way to get back into a non-survival mode, into a human mode. Yeah. And then hopefully when you're in a human mode, you can find human perspective in there somewhere along the way. So that does make a lot of sense to me as well. So, so the two terms, meditation and mindfulness, do you feel like in a modern society, more of the population are comfortable with those terms?
Look, I'm not really sure, and I'd be curious to know what you think about that. But and I don't care what we call it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not so worried about the label we put on being mindful or being able to be in connection with yourself or aligning yourself or with other people. I think I don't know what word needs to be put on that to make it the most lively, and I'm really not sure who calls what these days, because there seems to be an awful lot of difference of opinion about everything. You know?
Yeah, but it's funny how we layer our own definition on the top of terms, you know. So I found it interesting. We did one of those workshops there last year, and one of the ladies who was really enlightening in the conversation had a religious background. And when we had said, hey, we're going to meditate, she actually said, look, I need to flag that if this is at all at odds with my religion, I'm out. So there obviously is, with the term meditation, I feel like there is more of a religious connotation to it, and that a lot of people think that maybe that's only Buddhists or people of Eastern religion that maybe do it. Maybe, and I think the same with mindfulness. It's still a bit new wave, and I wonder whether, you know, it's people like Sam Harris and also Rowan's doing another app, which is 10% Happier. And I remember the name and he's a, you know, journalist, presenter on, might be one of those well-known. So I think maybe people,
I have it somewhere, but I can't find it.
Definitely. And I wonder whether they're hopefully mainstreaming, and that's why they're trying to use the word mindfulness, because maybe it doesn't necessarily have the religious connection that potentially comes with the word meditation.
You know, I think that's sort of an interesting point of view, because one of the places where I felt most comfortable meditating in a group was when I was in a situation looking after my mother, where there was, in the place that she lived, there was actually a chapel, and the Quakers went there to do their service. And their service is mostly a silent service. In other words, you're meant to be in prayer, which I took to mean you're meant to be in meditation. So I don't see any contradiction whatsoever. But I know that there are other people who see that as a very, you know, black and white sort of thing. You're either meditating or praying. I'm not sure I was a good enough Quaker to think that I was praying. I was meditating.
So did you grow up as a Quaker? Like, is that
no. I became interested as a result of trying to find groups where I felt like I was really uh, well supported, where I was safe
Yeah.
to be doing my meditating. And in fact, there is a very strong, or was a very strong, small but strong Quaker group here in Atherton. And
Oh, really?
so so I spent some years going quite regularly to Quaker meditation.
Yeah,
And
right.
I mean, those were religious people. I'm not, but they were
Yeah.
perfectly accepting of whatever attitude I had. So I think that you can find a way, but not everybody can get over the barriers, even the linguistic barriers, much less the deeper thought layers of the differentiation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting though that we still have these crossovers to religion in amongst all of this, and it's a prickly topic because it almost appears like the indicators are coming from religion. Like some of these practices are obviously religious, but because society is trying to move away from the structure of religion, that we don't want to be caught with the vegetables, the bits that are left over. But there's so many gems in those, and I think maybe by relabeling them, we're allowing for more people who get caught up in the terms to go, oh, well, if it's just being that, being present and catching my own breath, well, then I'm cool with that, but I don't want to be seen as religion. But in the same instance, I think by going through the Quaker process, you must have learnt something else about the process of, whether you want to call it praying or meditation. There must have been still some other skills you gained by going down that journey.
Yes, I think the most important thing for me though was to find a group where I felt reasonably safe, because
Yeah,
I think that's, I mean, it seems as though that's, if you can't start with safety, you can't go into a meditative or a prayerful state. So
mm,
I think that one huge advantage religion has always had is that it has enabled people to feel safe, because
yeah,
somebody is looking after them. Somebody else is running this show. I don't have to be responsible for everything, or whatever the reason is. But their deep belief allows them to feel safe. Well, that was just something that I completely missed. And
yeah,
I must say, I was also brought up in a family where there was a lot of physical safety, but no psychological safety. So, or emotional,
mm,
let's say emotional safety.
yeah,
So as long as you stayed in your head, you were safe in my family. But that meant
yeah,
you
yeah,
couldn't express your feelings, and you couldn't talk about things like meditation, or the feeling of unity with the universe, or the feeling of spiritual connectedness that might come from meditation or from religion. And I
yeah,
don't care where it comes from. Find it, find it
yeah,
wherever you find it, because we need to feel
absolutely.
connected. If it comes from drugs, that's one place it came from for me.
Yeah,
As long as you don't flip yourself out over them. It's the same thing
yeah,
with
yeah,
meditation or religion. You can flip out in any of those, can't you?
yeah, 100%. And I think it's interesting that we almost come back to these parallels now that I don't know when the polyvagal theory was. It's Stephen Porges or someone like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
who was the
yeah,
original developer, or evolver of the theory.
yeah.
That's not that old.
No, 70s he started working on that, is my belief, and
Yeah.
of course he's been developing it ever since.
So it's funny now that we go. Religion might have been a place where we can move into a sense of safety and community, which ultimately fits in exactly with how the polyvagal theory works, right? You
Yeah.
can't act as a human until you find a place of safety,
Hmm.
and move out of your survival mode into your humanizing, communicating mode. So that it's interesting that that underneath that now we have the psycho physical understanding of why religion makes a little bit more sense, and why people are drawn into it. So it's
Yeah,
intriguing that we're validating some of the stuff that we've just been able to feel before rather than understand to some extent.
I think that's very true. What's your personal relationship to all that?
Interestingly enough, I grew up as a Roman Catholic, and I've never really while I still, like probably most Australians, identify them. I think in the census there's some crazy amount of people who still identify as Roman Catholic.
Hmm.
I can't say I understood much about prayer, and I probably felt a bit weird when we first started playing around with meditation because I felt prayer was different. Um,
Ah,
I didn't, because it wasn't sort of a silent state like you were talking about. It was always, you're always saying something.
right.
And to some extent, I can still, the funny thing is, I can still go back to church now with my mother and father, and I can slip into the Lord's Prayer. And, they've changed a few of the words now at the end to be more appropriate for everyone. But essentially, I can just, jump into those chants without even having to feel
Yeah,
like I, stepped a beat. But there's not
yeah.
a lot of consciousness in that. There's not a lot
No.
of contemplative stuff. And when, I notice my children who are now, my boys are 20 going 21, they certainly through their schooling got introduced to the meditation thing. And you were like,
Oh, did
I
they?
was like, yeah, which was, a lot of it was just more about, stopping, I suppose, getting kids to stop, which is
Yeah.
probably as good as
Just shut
anything.
up for a minute.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
So it sort of meant that I hadn't really joined until we, I know they were assimilated, but it's not until we've been talking about it that I've really gone, oh, there's obviously a religious connotation or connection there to the learnings that are within meditation. And I must admit, I've been wandering in the wilderness with meditation. I've only really felt, if I was using a percentage, I feel like I've maybe got 10% of an understanding of what meditation or mindfulness is. But I agree with you. I have found the benefits um, enormously to do with not getting so engaged, because we're so much in autopilot. I feel like in modern life that with my traumatic events, which, like everyone's got, and some of
Yeah.
them I've been perpetuating because of my own childhood events, and some silly things that I have done over the years.
Yeah.
Now I sort of go, I can sort of see them a little bit clearer because I don't necessarily have to always dive into or I can investigate the emotion behind my initial mental reaction. And I think that really has helped me the mindfulness every morning has helped me catch myself or be present when I go, what the hell am I doing? Like, why am I getting upset over this reaction or whatever? And where does that come from? And, maybe I need to have a bit of a look into that. And that's probably even a good segue a little bit into the whole idea of moving from the acknowledgement into the feeling sense of those reactions. And I certainly, and I've actually said this a few times when we've been talking, that I'm actually glad as a male that I grew up with a lot of females around me when I was growing up.
Ah,
I had a lot of sisters who were around me a lot. And I think just purely by being in that experience that I have always been slightly maybe more emotionally attuned than a lot of men, which is
nice.
purely by accident. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
grateful
yeah.
for that. I'm grateful for that to occur, but I've now started to try and join together. Hey, why am I feeling that emotional response, that physical felt thing? And why is that occurring when this event occurs? And then
Beautiful.
going, maybe I need to try and find out that. Has meditation helped you to be able to connect to those two things at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think psychotherapy has helped me a lot
Yeah.
from that point of view, but meditation certainly also has. And I've been as I've pointed out, a tough nut to crack on that subject. Well, yeah, I have really struggled with this for way more time and put
Yeah.
way more effort in than I'd like to even admit to, because I haven't done very well with it. But I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I'm trying. And the longer you stay in it, the more you stick with the discipline, the better it gets.
I do think you're 100% right there. I feel like there is, with our toolkit that we're hoping to develop, I think there is some practice that is worth everyone going through. And I do think that connection to feeling is something intrinsically at a consciousness level, right? It
Yeah.
feels like if you can occasionally tap back into that, you can go, well, what is my body trying to tell me? What is my whole of being trying to tell me when I strike these things? And maybe I need to listen, even if I don't.
Oh, you're frozen a bit.
Need to.
You froze a bit, Darren.
One of the things, yeah, and one of
Oh,
the
now I can't hear you.
does it come back clearer
Yeah,
now?
there
Can
we
you hear
are.
me at all?
There we are. Ah,
Yeah,
yep.
okay. One other thing that I was interested in having a conversation, which might even lead us into the end of the episode. But so today was really about us talking about practices and tools that we're using to try and hopefully that others can experiment with and use as well, to try and find a way that if we continue on the journey of being the best version of ourselves and maybe understanding what is important for us as an individual and what's going to make us enriched. And I know we talked about, then going on from there to difficult conversations, and then, we talked about maybe having an episode about how does a home make you feel like, so,
Yeah.
once you move beyond this idea of yourself into a group, what does that look like? And I stole Jamie Wheel's word. He was using Communitas a bit, and then I realized
Oh,
I better
nice.
find out what that means.
Good for you.
Sometimes I like using good words, and then I go, what the fuck does that actually mean? It sounds great. And then the interesting thing this morning and again, it comes back to these Latin terms, and I'd like to, when we eventually get into our workshops, I do find it interesting that, things like hearth is the Latin word for focus. And, the same around what is a household in Latin includes like almost an extended community around the household, not just what we class as familiar.
Mm-hmm.
The Communitas says an unstructured community in which people are equal, the very spirit of community, an intense community spirit, the feeling of great social equality, solidarity, and togetherness.
Isn't that what we would be aiming for with this alternative housing model, where you bring 5 unrelated or likely unrelated people, not necessarily unrelated, but likely
Yes.
unrelated people together, that
Yep.
some form of communitas has to arise for that to be a successful model. And then you've got the whole thing of how much mindfulness, how much meditation, how much prayer. If you were a religiously oriented group, why not? How
Yep.
much, how many difficult conversations? How do you structure them? And boy, we're launching off into something that we don't know how to control. We don't know how to structure. We don't know, yeah, we're heading off into the great unknown, which is fabulous, but scary.
It is indeed. And the two bits I wanted to unpick with that, and I
Mm-hmm.
found this quite interesting, is they mentioned the term, which I think is about layers, but an unstructured community.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I found it interesting. We talked about a couple of times where we had experiences in groups where if we looked at a definition, when we were having that chat last time, I was with you, with, Russell and
Mm-hmm.
Jane was there, and we felt like we had almost an experience of communitas, right?
Communitas, yeah.
because we had this really close social connection. We're able to find equality and almost like a leveler. No matter who we were in the conversation, we felt that levelness and a quality of idea and a quality of thought and the quality of investigation and the empathy we all felt within that. So I think that experience to me felt like Communitas was in there somewhere. And I
Yes.
find it interesting that in the noun it says it's unstructured, and I felt like that was completely unstructured to end up there. Do you find that intriguing?
I find it intriguing, and I very much remember the conversation you're referring to because it was quite an unusual conversation. I think that the spontaneous, one of the things, I mean, you have to allow for things to arise spontaneously, but mostly if you structure them in the right way for them to arise. And that's what religion has done always. They've structured experiences such that you can have, if what your religion happens to want is a feeling of direct connection with the divine, they structure it such that you can end up with that feeling. Or if, say, in the Catholic Church, it's less that direct connection with the divine and more the connection with the whole community of believers. But I think that some way or another, you have to fall upon that feeling of communitas. And I think that one of the things that's difficult for us in the endeavor that we're launching into with pulling 5 people together to live in one household is to figure out how much structure is needed for this group, not for that group, but for this group. And how much meditation, how much mindfulness, how many difficult conversations, how do we structure them? And boy, I think I've seen people who do this really well. I'm not sure I'm there yet. I mean, I know I'm not there yet.
Yeah. And you just unpicked exactly all my own internal reservations when I heard that statement. I was a little bit like, I was intrigued that sometimes these things happen in a completely unthought of, unstructured way, that we form these moments of communitas. I also wonder whether sometimes those moments of communitas occur because of stress events or reasons we come to where we're almost galvanized by something. And we were galvanized by our own sharing of vulnerability in that situation. I think that's
so.
where maybe that's where that one started. But you hear of the same people with Navy SEALs talking about becoming completely aligned as a group when they're under massive stress to act as one single organism. You hear of it after cyclones and catastrophic events. But the interesting bit that I found when I read that over and over again, I was a little bit caught on the unstructured bit. But it feels like either side of those moments of communitas, we need to find a way to get back into a regiment or a structure that does enable us to not fall apart. Because you hear so many people go, oh, we formed this really good group, and then 6 months later, everyone is throwing rocks at each other. So it's almost like a river flowing through moments of communitas that need to be held together by a path of some sort. You're not going to all be sitting around singing Kumbaya. We've talked about this all the time, haven't we? Like, why has sustainability fallen apart so much? We come to these seminars and these workshops and you get all these completely aligned people and you feel communitas come, and then when it passes, everyone's going, yep, okay, let's get back in our cars and drive off.
Sustainably, one per car.
One per car, and get in a plane and go back to where we came from.
Or a private plane, even better.
So I just found that interesting, that it's almost like, just as so many things that are human, they have this flow where you have an upflow, but you need the downflow and a path so that hopefully the group continues to evolve and have the skills and the lessons. And as you said, we've got no fucking clue about what that actually looks like in practice. And I I do agree with you that I think every group will do more or less of. Some people might like, hey, we like to go and plant in the backyard. Let's just go down there and, put in this year's vegetable crop. Others might go, we need to put ourselves under extreme duress. How about we go for a hike over 40 kilometers once or twice a year, or whatever might be the case. And I think if we give people or a guided meditation group, or we all
or a
take on
religious a
yoga.
prayer group. To go back to that, whatever it is that structures you and puts you under the pressure to become a better person. And then awesome. You somehow have if you've somehow left enough space for there to be a spontaneous upwelling of communitas, that sounds pretty perfect. But how do we do that?
I think there's going to be lots. I mean, and I think maybe the good thing is by having these conversations, we do sometimes have a little bit of a glimpse, which is, hey, Polyvagal says we can't get to that spot until we're all at 100% safety with each other. How do we get ourselves there? What mechanisms can help us get there? How can we have enough vulnerability and trust in the group that we're developing to get to a point where occasionally that welling out comes unstructured, comes whatever, and we have these moments of communitas that give us enough of a glimpse so we go, wow, that's why we're humans. We're trying to continually seek that connectiveness in a meaningful, purposeful, valuable way. And I think that's the definition, and you say it so well. We don't have a housing crisis, we have a homing crisis. And that homing,
it goes deeper than the building.
It goes deeper than the building. And when we can work on it.
And I think that's the whole, the deeper point of People Purpose Place is to pull homing out of housing. And there are, there are all these physical improvements, but the real reason for doing this is to have a group where you actually have the possibility of spontaneously feeling communitas. I wonder if that's all we need to say for today.
I think that's a really good place to stop. And I think we've and I would like to say as a checkout probably, my gratitude for these conversations that we've had. I naturally am an introvert. I've sometimes been pushed into roles of being massively extrovert just by the way my career has taken me. And I have wondered over the years why sometimes after engaging with so many people, I've let out so much energy that I have no room for any other conversation. But I have valued your ability to help me feel engaged in conversation and enriched by conversation, so that I haven't run away from it, that I've used it as a vehicle to help me learn more about myself. So I wanted to say that gratitude of thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. And I think that I would say the same thing, that it's been a huge unfolding of trust amongst the three of us, you and Rowan and myself. And every time that happens in you, or every time I express another vulnerability and you two rise to the occasion and accept that, I simply become a better person without even trying to, if you see what I'm saying. I don't have to force myself to. You just support me to become a better person. And I think that's something we all have to be grateful for.
100%.
That opportunity.
Absolutely. And hopefully that's what People Purpose Place is about. If we can help others form that, that home, it doesn't have to be about, being related. The home is about that exact moment when we can help each other, connect each other, feel supported, and have that connection as humans that I think at a baseline consciousness we're seeking. So
beautiful.
I think that's might be the perfect spot for us to pull up today. And I think after our technical foo-bars to start off with, I think we've finished well.
Well done, you lot who are doing the technicalities. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Thanks, Colby. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Colby.
Awesome. Great.
And Rowan, I hope you're having a good time whilst we're struggling with technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Darren. And
Yeah, I've loved every second of it. Thank you very much.
let's get together again next week.
Yep, sounds great. See everyone next week.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.